Today's Daf we're going to be learning is Kiddushin Daf Lamed Dalet. Today's Daf is sponsored by the Hadran women of Long Island in honor of Rabbanit Michelle Farber, as the learning of Daf Yomi enters its second century, with deepest hakarat tov to our dear teacher and friend. No matter how complicated the sugya, you get us through it. Your encyclopedic knowledge, your passion for equity and access, and your love of learning and teaching have combined to make you a role model for all of us. May you and your family be blessed with the Ketibah v'Chatima Tova, and may you continue to derive nachat from all of us. Thank you for that beautiful dedication. And yes, this is the day that Daf Yomi started 100 years ago. Very, very exciting. It's a great day to celebrate our learning. And we have a fabulous daf because we're learning about a very relevant topic to many of us, which is mitzvot aseh shazman kama, time-bound commandments that women are exempt from. So we're going to start from a quote from our Mishnah at the bottom of Lam Gimel Amud Bet. Kol mitzvot aseh shazman kama, all mitzvot aseh that are time-bound, women are exempt from. So we're going to bring a braita. Tanu Rabbanit. Ezuhi mitzvot aseh shazman kama. What are examples of these time-bound commandments that women are exempt from? Sukkah, v'lulav, shofar, v'tzitzit, utfilin. Okay, we have a big list, which actually, well, not such a big list, but a small list, actually, I should say, but which includes a lot of different types of mitzvot aseh shazman kama. When we think of mitzvot aseh shazman kama, time-bound commandments that women are exempt from, now, they all fall into the same category that women are exempt. They don't have to keep them. Now, first of all, Rosh Hashanah is, today is the daf for Rosh Hashanah. Actually, this year comes out on Shabbat, and we don't blow the shofar. But generally on Rosh Hashanah, on the second day, we will blow the shofar. And most women that we know actually make sure to go to shul on Yom Kippur and on Rosh Hashanah and hear the shofar blows. And women who don't, try to have someone come to their house, because women view themselves as obligated. So this is strange because it's on the list where women are exempt. Sukkah, most women do sit in a sukkah, although when there's not enough room, that sometimes the women don't sit in the sukkah if it's a small sukkah. Lulav, it's become much more common nowadays that women do take a lulav to shul. Tzitzit and tefillin are in a category that's already much different than the others in terms of not necessarily halachically, not necessarily, I say, but much fewer women who opt in to do time-bound commandments do wear tzitzit or wear tefillin. Why that is an excellent question. There's probably no great answer for this. There are sources that seem to discourage women for different reasons. Tzitzit, they say, is kli gever, it's a man's clothing. Tefillin, by the way, there's a whole debate in general whether tzitzit is even a time-bound commandment. Rabbi Shimon holds that it's only during the day, and that makes it time-bound. Right? We didn't discuss really what makes something time-bound. Either it's during the day and not at night. Rashi says tefillin is because night you can't wear tefillin, or he suggests because Shabbat and Yom Tov you don't wear tefillin, which is also a subject of debate. So then time-bound could be it's only certain days of the year and not other days. Right? Interesting that something that's every day of the year other than Shabbat and holiday would make it time-bound. Right? Whereas Sukkah is on the other side of that, which is there's only certain days where you sit in a Sukkah, or shofar is only one day or 2 days where you're going to be hearing the shofar. So what exactly means time-bound is an interesting question and how we define it in all different ways. And also, what about women who want to opt in? Can they opt in? If they do, can they make the blessing on it or not? And it's possible that what developed, because this whole thing about women opting in really started in the 1200s when in Ashkenazi communities where women in general were becoming more active members of society and becoming more involved in things, and there was an interest on the part of women to be involved. Whereas before that, it was much more rare. And it could be that the women opted into mitzvot. This is just a suggestion. This is not, but women opted into mitzvot that were more community oriented, like in shul. So first of all, shofar is a huge exception because shofar turned into obligatory. Most people say that women are obligated now in shofar because the communities of women took it upon themselves to do it. And basically, when you take upon yourself to do something, it eventually becomes an obligation. So that's why women view themselves as obligated in this. And that's really based on custom. But the basic halacha is that women are actually exempt. But that's because women wanted to be part of going to shul on Rosh Hashanah. It's Yom Hadin, it's the day of judgment. They wanted to be part of what's happening. They don't want to be left out of that. Sukkah, the whole family is eating in the sukkah. What they're going to eat inside? They want to be part of what's going on in the family, in the community. Lulav already, maybe less women went to shul on Sukkot and it wasn't as popular. Although nowadays the women go to shul much more, becoming much more popular. The women take lulav. Same, potentially, one could try to suggest for tefillin and tzitzit. Now, tefillin and tzitzit, historically, very few women want it. First of all, it's an expense. It's probably a reason why lulav also. It's expensive to get another set of arba minim. something you're going to throw out at the end of the holiday, right? So maybe that's why women didn't. Tefillin are also very expensive. It's possible that that's why. It wouldn't really explain tzitzit. So we have to think about it, why it didn't dawn on women, let's say, to do those mitzvot, but it did others. And because of that, they found a way to permit those, but the ones that women weren't interested in, maybe they never looked for a way to permit and tried to give excuses and reasons why women weren't doing that. They talk about guf naki, you need a clean body. And therefore only those obligated with tefillin should do tefillin and not people not obligated. So again, there's a lot of lack of clarity here. And we're going to see even in the daf today, there's the Gemara, the rabbis are very confused by a lot of things here. We didn't get to yet is why are women exempt from time-bound commitments? So I'll wait for that till later in the daf and we will talk about it. So the braita starts off with this list of mitzvot aseh shazman grama. I already had a whole mouthful to say about that. We'll move on. What is not a time-bound commandment that women are obligated? Mezuzah, putting up a mezuzah on your door. Ma'akeh, so people don't fall. You have to put forget the word. You have to put something up. I don't know why I can't think of the word, but like a guardrail, a rail up on your roof so that people don't fall off your roof. Aveda, you have to return someone's lost item. And shiluach haken, sending out the bird, the mother bird, right, if you want to take the chicks. Now, Tosfot points out, by the way, that most of these actually have negative commandments associated with them. Now, women are obligated in all negative commandments. So Tosfot says, I understand, if women anyway are obligated in negative commandments, and these have negative commandments associated with them, like you have to return a lost item, and it also says, lo tuchal litalin, you can't ignore it. And you have to return the bird, you have to send the bird off, and it says, lo tikacha em alabanim, don't take the mother with the children, don't take the sons with the mother there. So Tosfot says, I don't understand. These are low tassets. So the Ramban is a good answer. The Tosfot also provides answers. Others provide answers as well. But the Ramban, I thought, was an interesting answer. He said, these negative commandments come with the positive. If you're not obligated to return a lost item, then you're not obligated to ignore it, right? You don't have a low tasset, a negative commandment of don't ignore it. Because if you're not obligated, then obviously you can't ignore it. And same with shiluach haken, for example. So that's a possible way of getting around this question. Anyway, that's a side question. Let's get back to the point. The point is these are not connected to time at all, and women are obligated. So we have a nice rule, and we have examples. Perfect. Well, not exactly. The Gemara says, "Uklalahu." This is a general rule. What do you mean? There's exceptions to the rule. Harei matzah, simcha, hakel. 3 examples of mitzvot that are time-bound. Matzah eating on the first night of Pesach, definitely time-bound. Simcha, being happy on the holiday, eating nice food and drink and buying new clothes before the holiday, etc. And hakel, which is once every 7 years, they would get up and read the Torah. Now, where do we know women are obligated? So matzah, the Torah says, don't eat chametz for 7 days, eat matzah. So they say whoever can't eat chametz, which is women as well, because they're obligated in negative commandments, also has to eat matzah. So that gets women in. Simcha, it says either you and your household means your wife, or your daughter is a girl, she'd be obligated. So there you see they're obligated. Hakel, which says in the pasuk explicitly, you gather everybody together, hakel ta'am, anashim, nashim, v'taf, men, women, and children. So here you have it. Women are obligated, even though they're time-bound commandments. Vitu, and all the more so, we'll give you some from the other list. Any commandment that's not time-bound, we said women are obligated. But wait, Harei Talmud Torah, Piryao, Livyao, Pidyon Ben, Delav Mitzvot Aseh Shazman Gramahu, V'Nashim Torah. Okay, learning Torah, your sons and not your daughters. Piryao, Rivya, there's actually a machloket about this, but there's one opinion. The main opinion says only men are obligated because it says Peru Revu, and right, multiply, be fruitful and multiply, and conquer the land. And men are the ones who generally conquer, not women, and therefore men are obligated, women are not. And Pidyon Ben, the redemption of the firstborn child, is a commandment for the man, not for the father, not the mother. So these are all not time-bound commandments, because Pidyon Ben, you might have to do it on the 30th day, but you could do it after that also. So if you miss your chance, you can continually do it. So why aren't women obligated? Why aren't they obligated if they're not time-bound? So these are lav mitzvot aseh shazman gramahu, and yet nashim are p'turot anyway. So what happened to our rule? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein lemedim min haklalot. Even though the pasuk says the Mishnah says, all mitzvot, kol mitzvot aseh shazman grama, don't take all so seriously. That word kol doesn't always mean only. We don't learn from the word kol to say there's no exceptions to the rule. And not only that, but even if, when it says everyone except for this, we still can have more exceptions to the rule. Like, for example, this is taking it one step farther. Here, we didn't have any exceptions. But they're basically saying, expect there always to be exceptions. Even if when it says everything but this, still there could be more exceptions. How do we know? It's not totally different subject. It says in the Mishnah, in Shabbat, it's an Eruvin, an Eruvin. Bakol ma'arvin, you can make an Eruv with anything. Umishtatvim, or do shitufim va'od. These are all different ways that we put down food to allow people to carry on Shabbat. Chutz min hamayim u'amelach. So you can use any kind of food, just not water and salt. Betuleka, what? Is there no more? Vayika k'mehenu pitriot. Truffles and mushrooms, right? Mushroom truffles. You can't use those. That's not considered real food. It's no nutritional value. Ella, and they don't grow from the ground. Anyway, this whole thing about those. So they say here you have it. It says with everything except for water and salt. And by the way, there's more exceptions to the rule that weren't mentioned. Okay. So now we have a rule, but we have many exceptions. Okay. This already raises a lot of questions. Maybe we'll stop here for a minute and we'll talk about what are reasons, right? Is it because they're time bound that women are exempt? In which case there's room for all these questions, right? Then why are there exceptions to the rule? So it's a big question why women are exempt from time bound commandments. So it's a question that, interestingly enough, it's a very big question. And I would think a lot of us really wonder about this all the time. Most of the commentators didn't really talk about this, but there are a bunch, and I will quote some of them. The Abu Draham, who lived in Spain in the 1400s, in the 14th century, wrote, the reason why women are exempt from mitzvot aseh shazman grama, I'm just paraphrasing while I read along in the Hebrew, is because, you ready for this? A woman is mishu'abedet leba'ala. Okay, just like an Evet Knani, who is subjugated to his master, a woman is subjugated to her husband. Okay, this obviously rubs us the wrong way in our modern sensibilities. But what does she say? What does he say? I'm sorry. La'asot tzrachav. She has to do whatever the husband wants. So he basically says, if she would have to do time-bound commandments, then you might have a situation where she has to do a mitzvah, but her husband wants her to do something, and then she's stuck in between God and her husband. And that will create a lot of tension in the family, and either she'll get, right, she can risk getting God upset or risk getting her husband upset, and therefore God said, I'm going to exempt you so that you can have peace with your husband. Okay? That's an interesting answer, difficult for us to think that a woman is subjugated to her husband and has to do everything he wants her to do, although it could be understood in a historical context. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch is on the other one. He's coming from Germany in the 19th century, and he is trying to, and some people view his answer a little bit as more apologetic, right? Which is, he says that women don't need these mitzvot. Okay? And he says, because what's the whole point of these mitzvot? They're mivatot amitut machshavot ekronot b'achplatot al yidei masim simlim. It's doing symbolic actions for to be able to connect with God, if you want to say it like that. He doesn't use those words, but that's really the idea. And they're time bound. You need to do this every, X amount of time, whether it's daily, during the day, not at night, from time to time on the holidays. And the Torah assumes the woman knows her place. She has excitement to be connected to God. She doesn't need these things. Man needs to be pushed to do it. And that's, we kind of view that often as an apologetic answer. It's hard to really understand that the Torah viewed us in that way. It sounds nice. Oh, women are on a higher level, but I don't know. Again, I'm raising just difficulties. I'm not saying I don't agree with any of these, but I am saying that there's weaknesses to all these arguments. Rav Moshe Feinstein, America in the 20th century, wrote that he says most women aren't wealthy. And basically they have to do the childbearing stuff, right? They bear the children and then they bring them up. And basically they say that's more important than the children, raising your children. And that's why anything that's going to be time bound, that they're going to be busy with their children, they won't be able to, right? Then it's not that they're subjugated to their husbands, it's more that they're bound to their children. Right? Obviously, both the husband answer and the children answer doesn't deal with women who are single, women who their children are older already and not bound by those things, right? That's always the big question about this kind of thing. Now, some will say that this all relates to why time bound, right? And what the connection with time bound. But a little bit less so, but he at least addresses it something. Some people say that the time bound, and this is a more modern approach, is really just a category. It was known, and this is, we always say, what comes first, the drasha or the halakha? Which comes first, the klal, the rule, or the details? It was probably known that all these things women were exempt from, and then they tried to say, well, what's the common denominator? What's the thread that links these cases? And it's not because they're time bound that women are exempt. It's just that there were a bunch of mitzvot that women were exempt from. It doesn't help us. We still don't know why, but they were exempt from those mitzvot for whatever reason. And then they tried to come up with a category, something that binds these together. And that's why there's a lot of exceptions, because it wasn't the rule. It wasn't the reason. It just was a way, right, to connect these cases and give it a rule so that you could view it and remember. Right? It helps you remember. It's like a mnemonic device. That's a whole different explanation. In any case, I'm leaving you with a lot of food for thought here, because it's really, there's no good, clear answer as to what is the reason. And you're going to see that the Gemara is going to struggle a lot with this, and it's going to be a little bit long-winded what we're going to do here, but you'll see that there's a struggle with the Gemara as to why do you learn this, why do you get to that conclusion, not this conclusion, why this and not that. So they're going to say the following. So we already started with, there's a lot of exceptions to the rule. Now we'll continue on. Where do we get it from? We're going to end our daf with, where do we get that? Right? This starts off with, how do we know time-bound commandments, they're exempt? And then we're going to ask at the end of the daf, how do we know that non-time-bound commandments, right, things that are not bound by time, women are obligated? So here they're going to say, Gamar mi tefillin. Tefillin is our example. We're going to learn it from tefillin. How do we know women are exempt from tefillin? Well, we don't know yet. We'll see in a minute. But once we have tefillin, we're going to say, this builds the paradigm. Ma tefillin nashim p'turot, af kol mitzvah daseh shazman grama nashim p'turot. Just like tefillin are exempt, also all time-bound commandments. Tefillin, so now where do they know tefillin from? Gam lami Talmud Torah. Well, tefillin is mentioned in Kriyat Shema right after we talk about learning Torah. Shinantam levanecha, teach your children, and then it says ukshartam laot al yadecha, tie it around on your hands, etc. Tefillin. So once we know ma Talmud Torah nashim p'turot, because b'nechem v'lo b'notechem, af tefillin nashim p'turot, so tefillin women should be exempt as well. To which they say, what do you mean? But tefillin is next to Talmud Torah, and it's also next to what comes right after tefillin, mezuzah. And mezuzah, we already said they're obligated. So why don't we say nakish tefillin the mezuzah? Why don't we learn it from mezuzah and say they're obligated? Well, tefillin the Talmud Torah itakish bein b'parasha rishona bein b'parasha shniya. Tefillin the mezuzah b'parasha shniya lo itakish. Well, if you look at both sections of the first two sections of Shema, the order in the first is shinantam, teach your children, then tefillin, then mezuzah. So tefillin is in between mezuzah and Talmud Torah. But in the second chapter, it comes from Dvarim Yud Aleph, it starts with V'limad temotam et b'nechem, teach your sons. Then it goes to, Ukshartam starts with tefillin, then it goes to teach your sons, and then it goes to mezuzah. So there, it's not next to mezuzah, but it is next to Talmud Torah in both cases. So that's why we're going to learn it from Talmud Torah, and we're not going to learn it from mezuzah. V'nakish mezuzah le Talmud Torah. But mezuzah is next to Talmud Torah in the second section. Why don't we say, let's make a hekesh there? And why don't we say that just like women are exempt from Talmud Torah, they should be exempt from mezuzah? Lo sakada tach tertif. Well, what does it say there? Right after mezuzah in the second section, where Talmud Torah, mezuzah, and then it says, L'man yibu yimechem v'mei b'nechem, so that you live a long life. Now, what are you going to say? Right? And it seems to say, again, if you understand things with juxtaposition, write mezuzot, put them up in your house, and you'll live a long life. So what are we going to say? Gavri bayachai, nashe lo bayachai. What? Men need long life and women don't? Of course, women need long life also. So therefore, they're going to do the mitzvah mezuzah, and you don't learn it from Talmud Torah. V'harei sukkah. Now they're going to say, wait a minute. Your rule is any mitzvah aseh, a time-bound commandment, women are exempt. Blanket exemption, other than some exceptions to the rule. Well, if so, something doesn't jive here. We're going to have a few questions like this. Two questions. Harei sukkah, the mitzvah aseh shazman grama. We're going to have two questions with the exact same structure. Sukkah is a time-bound commandment. We know that. And we know that women are exempt. So this shouldn't raise a problem. But what? Why is sukkah mitzvah aseh shazman grama? How do we know? Dichtiv b'sukkot tishvu shivat yamin. It says because you should sit in the sukkot shivat yamin. You have to read the rest of the pasuk. Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yishvu b'sukkot. Every citizen in Israel sits in the sukkah. And there's a drasha in Masechet Sukkah that says, Tama dechtiv rachmana ha'ezrach lo tziyat hanashim. Because it says the citizen, it's to exclude women. Halav hachi, but were it not for that, nashim chayavot. It sounds like if you didn't have that drasha, women would be obligated. Now, we just said it's time bound. Women wouldn't be obligated. What do you need a drasha for if it just fits into this rule? Again, this is showing a weakness of the rule, really. So the Gemara is going to come up with an answer. Abai is going to have an answer. It's going to say, it's doing. Amar Abai, it's doing. You need it anyway. Why? You might have thought, there's one halacha we learned a lot of times in Sukkot, that because it says live in the Sukkah, you have to live the way you live during the year. And ma dira ish v'ishto, av Sukkah ish v'ishto. Since in your house you live husband and wife together, we assume maybe in your Sukkah you're supposed to live husband and wife together, and therefore the women should be obligated to sit in the Sukkah. That's why you need the drasha. So even though really it does fall into this category, and theoretically you would be exempt, you might have thought you're not exempted, and that's why we need the pasuk to tell you, ha'ezrach. But without it, you might have thought this is an exception to the rule. Rava gives a different reason. Rava Amal, turning now to Amud, Itzrich, you needed it. Why did you need it? He thinks there was a different reason you might have thought you're obligated, women are obligated in Sukkot, because it says on the 15th of the month, and it says on Pesach, it's on the 15th of the month, and they learn a bunch of things from Xer Shabbat between Sukkot and Pesach, the fact that they're both on the same day of the month, and the same words appear there and the same words appear there. It's called Xer Shabbat. We learn what's true for one, true for the other. So Mala Halan Nashim Chayavot, since women are obligated and eating matzah on the first night of Pesach, you might have thought, Afkan Nashim Chayavot, maybe Nashim are obligated, women are obligated to sit in the Sukkah, Sricha. That's why you needed that drasha. So we gave two answers as to why, even though there's a blanket exemption for time-bound commandments, you still need a drasha by Sukkah, either because Teshvu came to do, or because, right, you have to sit the way you live during the year, or because Chamisha Asar. Second question, same type of question. Going to see God during the three holidays during the year, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot, we're obligated to go see the face of God, which means also bring him a korban. We go to Jerusalem to do that. But women are exempt. Now, why are women exempt? You would assume because it's a time-bound commandment. But it also says there, Yera'eh kol zichorcha, all males, and they learn males and not females. So same question again. It's a time-bound commandment. The reason why women are exempt is because it says males, not females. Halav hachi sounds like if you didn't have that drasha, nashim chayavot, women would be obligated. But why? Right? They should be exempt. To which they say, which means really you don't need the pasuk. So why do you need the pasuk? It's true. You need it because you might have thought it says Yera'eh kol zechorcha, right? Every male should see the face of God, and it says by hakel, where they have to gather and all hear the Torah, where it says women specifically in the pasuk, and it says there when all the people come to be seen, right, to be seen by God. So riyah, the same word appears. You might have thought we learn from hakel that women are obligated in the three holidays also to come to the temple. Well, that's why you need a special drasha. But really, both of these sukkah and riyah are exempt because they're time-bound commandments. But they need a special drasha because you might have thought otherwise. You might have thought there are exceptions to the rule. Okay, so that was our first question against this whole thing, first set of questions. Now we have another. Why did tefillin, first we said, where do we learn it from? We said we learned from tefillin. Where do we learn tefillin from? From Talmud Torah. Why didn't we learn from mezuzah? We dealt with all of them. Then we dealt with, if the running assumption is women are exempt, then why do you need special drasha for sukkah? Why do you need special drasha for riyah? We dealt with that. Now we say, why do you learn from tefillin? Why didn't you use as your paradigm simcha? It says simcha that women are obligated. So why wouldn't you say, just like you're obligated to be happy on the holiday, women are obligated, therefore, even in time-bound mitzvah? Amar Abai, Isha ba'alam simcha. The mitzvah of simcha really isn't on the woman. It's really on the man. The man is obligated to make his wife happy by buying her clothes, by buying her nice food, etc. To which they say, what are you talking about? Now, it says in the Torah, okay, Rashi says, by simcha, he quotes a pasuk in Dvarim Tetzayin, it says, Hager vayatom almana. Okay, also the widow needs to be happy on the holiday. So, how do you explain that? If it's not her husband who's obligated, she doesn't have a husband. To which they answer, B'shul yatzlo. Now, that's a commandment to us that if we are helping, we have to help almanot on the holiday. If she's living in my house or I'm helping take care of her, I have to make sure she has what she needs for the holiday. So that's an obligation on other people, not on her. So you could say that simcha really is an obligation on somebody else. But we still could ask another question, which is Ne'elach miHakel. Why isn't Hakel the paradigm? By Hakel, it says women, men, and children. Men, women, and children. Women are included. Why don't we say we learn from there to all other cases? Because we have two exceptions to the rule. We have matzah and we have hakel. Both those, there's a special drasha, or it says it explicitly in the pasuk, that women are obligated. Therefore, normally the way laws work is, if it's mentioned one time in the Torah, we're going to say it's a paradigm for other cases. But once you have two cases, we're going to say just those two cases and no more. Otherwise, the Torah could have just had one, and you would have gotten it to the second case. So the fact that it says it in two places means you can't learn from here. It's exceptions, just these cases. So since it says it by matzah and it says it by hakel, you can't learn from them to anything else. To which the Gemara says, well, on that note, you could say the same for the reverse. We wanted to learn it from tefillin, but it's not just tefillin. We have tefillin and going to the temple are special drashot there that women are exempt. And maybe you'd say, it says it in these two places. That's to teach you we can't use this as a paradigm. To which they say no. When we say shnei ktuvim b'im ke'echad, that's when they're not really necessary to say. But in this case, shricha, you needed the pasuk to tell you that the women are exempt in these cases because you wouldn't have thought so otherwise, and therefore they're not being able to be used for this drasha of two times. You can't, once they're mentioned twice, you can't learn anything else because they each needed separate mention, and therefore each theoretically could build a paradigm for everything else. Why are each necessary? If you just had tefillin and not going to the temple, well, you might have thought that maybe, right, you'd learn from tefillin to all the other cases, but then you say, oh, but not for going on the holidays. Then women would have to go because it's like hakel, because of the Gzera Shabbat. Let's say the Torah just said it, women are obligated in hakel, and it didn't have this juxtaposition of tefillin with Talmud Torah to teach you they're exempt. Hava amina akish tefillin l'mezuzah. I might have thought to make the hekesh the other way and say tefillin is learned out from mezuzah, and that's why you needed specifically to have the drasha with Talmud Torah in both those cases, right? In both sections of Shema, it's next to Talmud Torah to teach you they're exempt. Therefore, each one is uniquely there. Therefore, each one theoretically can build a paradigm for everything else. It's not a classic case of shnei ktuvim. But the Gemara now flips the question back to matzah and hakel. You could say the same thing about matzah and hakel. Both were necessary, in which case you could say maybe we could build a paradigm from that. To which the Gemara is going to say, not really. Why were they both necessary? Bishlama, I get you're right that one of them is necessary, but both aren't. We go in one direction, but not the other. If you just wrote hakel and you didn't write matzah, I would have thought you're exempt on the holiday of Sukkot from going in your sukkah. You would have thought you're exempt from eating matzah because you're exempt from sukkah, and we learned the Gzera Shabbat. And therefore, I need matzah. But you could have written just in matzah, v'lo by hakel, and you wouldn't need a pasuk for hakel. Why not? I would have said, tfalim chayavim nashim lakoshken. If kids are obligated, what? Of course, women are going to be obligated, and therefore, I would have known it anyway. And therefore, that second pasuk is not necessary, which turns us into a case of shnei ktuvim. And therefore, hilka chavu l'shnei ktuvim habein kecha be'em lamti. And that's how we get in the end why we're going to learn it from matzah. Why we're going to not learn it from matzah and hakel, but we are going to learn from tefillin and riyah, theoretically, right, and learn from there to all the other cases. So now they're going to say, well, that whole argument that we're not going to learn it from matzah and hakel, because there are two cases, and once it's written twice, we're not going to be able to learn. It's clearly showing their exceptions. That's only if you hold. It works if you say emalamdim. I set it up as if everybody says that, but now we're going to learn not everybody says it. But some people say that if two psukim, still you could say it's just these cases. Once it's 3 psukim, then already not. So what are you going to say to that? Here it's 2 psukim. Maybe you really could learn from there and it could build a paradigm. And then you would learn that all time-bound commandments women are actually obligated. And, right, so again, this is just keeps throwing up these suggestions. Who's to say time-bound commandments women are exempt? Maybe because it wasn't so clear that time bound is going to mean, oh, women are exempt. We're kind of used to it, but they're kind of suggesting maybe it's not really the case. And furthermore, and this question they're actually going to come back to later, not in today's stuff. And now we're going to get to the other question, which is, we wanted to know how you know the time-bound commandments women are exempt. Where do we get it from? From tefillin. But where do we get that non-time-bound commandments women are obligated? To yalaf mimora, we're going to learn it from fear of your parents. Fear of your parents, ma'mora nashim chayavot, women are obligated in fear of your parents, because it says ishi movaviv tirau, and they learn for women tirau, which is plural, and therefore women are included as well. They should be, you should fear your parents, and you is in plural, you meaning males and females. They're included in that. And therefore, right? That's not time bound. You always have to fear your parents at all times. So therefore, women are obligated. To which they say, what do you mean? On that account, you can learn from Talmud Torah, because there it's not time bound, and yet women are obligated. Now we're going to end with same kind of answer we answered before. Why not learn it from there? Because their Torah and Purah Rivya are shnei ketuvim habim ke'echad. Okay, the reason you can't learn from Torah and Purah Rivya is because those, again, are two cases. And once you have two cases, you can't learn it to the general rule that women are exempt from these mitzvot. Now we're going to get to, starting in tomorrow's daf, what about the opinion that says the women are obligated in Purah Rivya? Then you're only left with one. And then again, it could build the paradigm. And also, what do you do if you hold two ketuvim? You still could learn, but not three. So anyway, that's our daf for today. Okay, quick summary. We started with mitzvot aseh shazman karma, nashim turot. What are examples? What are the examples of mitzvot aseh that are not time bound that women are obligated to do? Then we got to, where do we learn this all from, right? And first of all, aren't there exceptions? And then where do we learn it from? And why do we learn it from the other cases? And a back and forth about, right? And if it's so obvious that women are exempt, then why do we need a special exemption by sukkah? Why do we need a special exemption by going to the temple on the holidays? And then we ended with, where do we get the source that women are actually obligated and ones that are not time bound? With that, we will end our daf for today, wishing everybody a shana tova, k'tiva v'chatima tova, and thank you again for the beautiful dedication.